Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar, How to Optimize Your Digital Events in a Time of Crisis, which will be presented by Saoirse and Erica from Nation Builder. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during this session, please also type it into the questions box and Saoirse and Erica will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Saoirse and Erica to get things started. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here today with everyone. We're going to be digging in partnership with Connecting Up on how to optimize your digital events in a time of crisis. And so I'm Saoirse. I am originally from London, but I'm based in Boston these days, and I work with Nation Builder. I've worn many different hats in my 4 years of being here. And I currently run our strategic partnerships program, and I'm really excited to be digging in, and we've been doing it kind of around the globe with different partners on how to transition your events into digital events during a time of crisis. And so I'll kick it over to Erica to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica, and I am based here in Hobart, Tasmania. I work as the account manager here in Australia, so I work with our Australian and New Zealand customers and often run these online events. We were doing this before and we've just been doing it even more now, so I'm excited to share with you guys the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way.
Awesome. All right, so let's dive right in. So who is Nation Builder? Why are we here today? So Nation Builder is leadership software. In our software, you have the ability to create a website, engage with your data through a CRM, broadcast your community via email, and fundraise. We were founded in 2009 to democratize democracy with the strong held belief that the world needs more and better leaders. It is our mission to strengthen democracy and offer the tools of leadership to everyone. And a key thing to note here is that some of the most impactful community building best practices are actually baked into the platform itself. As a company, we've been hosting virtual summits and events for years, and we actually recently transitioned our entire staff to be remote. We've always had a deep connection with building community at Nation Builder with both our staff, our customers, and our partners. And in doing this, we've used a number of different strategies to ensure that people are able to kind of come to the table as their whole self in a digital manner. And we really wanted to kind of dig in today and share some of our learnings of hosting events virtually and help you transition your events during this unprecedented time. So what are we going to cover? Up first, in the webinar, we're going to be talking through overall best practices for hosting online events, including 3 must-have tactics. We're also going to review different types of events best suited for virtual engagement. And finally, we'll just take a look at kind of some of how the ways that software can help you implement those strategies. And as the Connecting Up team mentioned, there will be a webinar, of course, sent out afterwards. Okay, so 3 must-haves for a successful online event. This may seem really basic, but it's an important thing to cover. So get your tech sorted. Video conferencing software. There's a lot of options out there right now. Right now, we're using the GoToWebinar function. There's also Zoom and Google Hangouts and Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of software and they all have different features. So make sure that you want to understand specifically what features you would like to use or need to use for your event as you go in to make a commitment with using one of these softwares. Some of them have limitations around the number of attendees you can have, whether there's chat functionality, things like that. So it's really important to nail down what type of software and video conferencing software you want to use. Second is internet connection. I highly recommend, if you are hosting a webinar, to hardwire in to whatever your internet connection is. It can be really difficult if you are hosting an event and sometimes this happens, right? Power cuts out, but really try and make sure that you have a hardwired internet connection when you're hosting online events. Power, your laptop dies, whatever that is, make sure you're plugged in throughout the event. Audio, being in a location where there is no background noise or as little as possible to make sure that what you are saying to folks is able to come across as clearly as possible. Your audio experience for some individuals may be the only way that they're actually absorbing your information. So it is really important to maybe use a headset or a microphone for folks who are regularly communicating through this medium. This information might not be that revolutionary, but it is very important to hosting a successful online event. In that, this is a slide that we like to use at Nation Builder when we're setting up our own online events. And I just wanted to show it to you as an example of something that you can kind of implement into your online events. So when you're using a specific tool, and similar to what the Connecting Up team did here, is just making those house rules and actually showing people and making sure that they're clear on how to interact with the software itself that you're using for the video conferencing tool. So in this example, this is just a screenshot of the Zoom software itself, where you can interact and what the expectations of you as an attendee are. Up next, creating a good experience. So this one's interesting. At Nation Builder, we really dive into kind of that relationship building, and being on camera is a big part of that. And so if possible, if that makes sense for your community and who you're working with, everyone should be on camera, right? We're in a moment of social distancing and physical distancing. So creating a sense of community and just the ability to see other individuals is a really great way to kind of kick off some type of engagement with your event. Being muted. It can be very difficult if someone's unmuted when you are presenting, and so making sure that you're muted at all times. Recording your events. We're seeing right now, there's a lot of content out there. A lot of people are hosting virtual events, and there's a lot of different options for people to attend and interact with different virtual content. And so having a recording will allow you to actually engage with folks after the event who were able to not attend, or if people want to disseminate the information within their organization for other people who weren't able to attend. Content. So not all of the content that you had planned for an event that you maybe had previously scheduled could actually be ported over to a virtual experience. So make sure to review your content, trim the fat where necessary, as honestly, the average adult actually has a 20-minute attention span. So really make sure to kind of allow for pauses and questions where that's possible or fitting within the type of event. If you're doing a broadcast event, that may not necessarily be appropriate, but if you are in kind of a dialogue or a panel type situation, there may be areas for pause to engage the audience. Another note on content, this might be obvious, but use the virtual tools. So for example, don't kind of come up here and use a whiteboard behind you to articulate your message, but use tools like Google Docs and virtual whiteboards, things like that, so that everyone can actually participate visually in your content. And last but not least, in these 3 must-haves for a successful event is facilitating and facilitation. And so when we're thinking about what facilitating means, thinking about setting rules for your participation. So is there going to be a live chat where people can communicate with each other and communicate with the audience? Is it actually more of a dissemination of information where folks can ask questions at the end of the session, right? Making it very clear to how participants can actually interact with what you're doing. Setting facilitation roles. So if you have someone who is hosting, and then also having kind of a co-facilitator, so someone who is there to monitor the questions that are coming in the chat, checking for technical issues that are happening as folks join into the webinar. Sometimes you'll need a visual lead, a slides lead, a notes lead. It really depends on the types of event you have, but making sure that your organization is set up to have specific facilitation roles within your event is really key to creating a successful virtual event. Introductions and icebreakers. It's really, really great when you are coming into a new audience or engaging folks for the first time to have a clear introduction of who you are and why you're there and delivering that particular type of content. The other thing here is with icebreakers. This is more for the track of if you're doing a community-oriented or community-building event, and is really important to think about how can you just get that moment of you know, pulling someone out of maybe they were just having a stressful time in another meeting, but they've now showed up here. How do you get people to be present in the content you're delivering? And an icebreaker is a really great way to actually do that. And last but not least is leave time for a Q&A and a debrief. So this is a really great way to actually ground people in the information that you have just disseminated to them or shared with them. It allows for open-ended questions of people who, you know, a lot of people don't always raise their hand. And so making sure that everyone's able to be involved in that Q&A component is a great way to get ideas flowing and start to have people think about the content you've just delivered. Okay, so what types of online events for your community? So specifically today, we're going to focus on these 4 event types. So number 1 is the educational component. That's where you're sharing knowledge and information. Number 2 is your fundraisers. How do you raise money online right now? 3 are conferences, right? So you are maybe hosting a debate. It's a larger type scale event. And last but not least are community events. They're going to be the 4 areas we really dig into now. Up first is the educational events and training courses. So experiential learning is a practice that we have at Nation Builder to make sure that folks are able to engage with particular content that we're delivering. It's really important when you think about experiential learning to operate in a model where you are demonstrating. So you're demonstrating whatever the teaching is that you are trying to get across. You then allow for practice. So you actually allow for individuals to practice whatever that actionable item was, whether it's being in a software, whether it's learning how to, you know, run call time for fundraising, whatever that delivery is, allowing the individuals receiving the information to practice it, and then being able to debrief it and check for understanding and really engage with the audience based on active listening. And so active listening is something, again, that we practice a lot at Nation Builder with both our customers and with our partners in ecosystem. And it fits into kind of 2 buckets. So one is reflective listening, which actually kind of allows you to slow down the conversation and be intentional and show humility. At the end of the day, you're able to kind of pause and reflect back what you've heard. And Eric and I are going to just demonstrate that for you now in a second. And the other is validated listening. So that's where you can kind of synthesize what you've just heard from an individual who you're training or teaching educational content to, and then be able to gauge what their understanding for a particular content stream was. So, Erica, would you like to jump into a role play with me of reflective listening?
Sure thing. All right. So Sorsha, I'm on the board of a not-for-profit, and I've been tasked with fundraising $5,000 from my personal network for our end of the year campaign. I reached 1,500, and then I haven't had a new donation in over a week. So I'm not sure how many more times I can ask my friends and family for money.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have this kind of very large goal of $5,000 to raise, and you've gotten to the point now where you're at that 1,500, and you're taking, you know, kind of a moment to reflect on how you can actually go out there and achieve the rest of that goal when you've tapped up your friends and family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And scene. So that might feel really uncomfortable for folks who've never done this before. I remember when I first kind of went into that reflective listening training that we do at Nation Builder, but what it allows for is pause in the moment, right? And the ability for you to just reflect back instead of offering a solution or an orientation for how they should move forward. It's a really great practice when you are trying to teach and disseminate information that you hold. Practice. So jumping back into the slide, practicing during these events is a really key way to gauge for what type of understanding people have and how the content is being received. And last but not least is follow up. It is key to follow up with people at the end of an event. One, you could be seeking feedback. You can be actually sending out in the educational component. It's important to send out, maybe it's, you know, homework of some sort, or a task that they can practice, or a template that they can implement within their campaign or their particular fundraising operation at that moment in time. Speaking of fundraising, we are going to jump right into fundraisers specifically. So Fundraisers are a really important part of events for a lot of organizations and specifically nonprofits. I'm sure a lot of the people who are actually on this call today had fundraisers planned in the coming weeks and months. We're here to hopefully give you some insight into how you can bring those events online without impacting your bottom line. So I'm going to break it down into these 3 areas. So we've got before the event, during the event, and post-event. So before the event, when you're thinking about moving your fundraiser online, it's important to consider doing some type of additional outreach to folks than you would normally do for an in-person event. So think about tactics like surveying your RSVPs. This is going to be a key thing to ensure that you've got information on why they actually want to be a part of your fundraiser. So I'm going to use an example for this, right? So I'm hosting a fundraiser, for example, to build an animal shelter in my local neighborhood. Before the event, I'll send out a survey to all of my RSVPs to know what types of animals they have at home. Okay, so I'm getting some additional information on these individuals so I can speak more personally to them when they're at my event. I want to speak about a money bomb, and I'd love if at the end here, if folks have questions on this, we can really dig in. So a money bomb actually allows your organization to collect commitments to donate, so AKA a pledge, right? This gives you another touch point to actually engage with those potential donors prior to the live event, where they'll hopefully be donating. With a money bomb, you can also time box into a specific period to encourage pledges, as there is you can create a very small and urgent window to do such. The other tactic that you can think about here is a concept of personal fundraising pages. This will allow your community to take ownership over how they're actually contributing to your organization by having kind of a stake in the ground of what their total fundraising goal is for your organization. So now we transition into during the event, during the actual live event of a fundraiser that's now happening digitally. So if your fundraiser was originally an event that had a keynote speaker or a fireside chat, it's really, really key to make sure that you prep with those folks beforehand to ensure that they can actually deliver the content that's necessary. So again, thinking back to those tips to a successful event, making sure that the content, we've trimmed the fat, that we've made sure that everything is actually visually able to be presented virtually. During the event, also some things that we've seen to be really successful is doing a screen share with all of the attendees where they can actually see a live donation thermometer ticking up as more and more people donate. We've seen that it gives kind of a positive engagement of how the event is going, how the fundraising is happening, and it gives you that essence of being like kind of in the room and hearing the buzz around what's happening with the fundraising goal. You can also think about a texting program during the event. I would say that if the group is larger than 100, that's like kind of your key market for when you use texting during an event. If you have less than 100, it could actually feel, a little less authentic and not the way you want to present it. But if you have one of those larger groups or audience attending your fundraiser, using texting to interact with them live throughout the program is really key. The other thing to think about when you have a smaller group of individuals attending a fundraiser is using this concept of breakout sessions. And so I know a lot of the video conferencing software have options like that, where you can actually select a group of people that can go into a specific breakout room, which is just another virtual component of that software, where these individuals have gone out into a breakout room. You could use this, for folks to network based on a particular geographic location they are from or an interest that they've identified with, like you would at a normal fundraiser, right? So this again comes back to that survey before the event. You've identified, for example, in that the example I gave, you identified what pets people had at home. So you could break out into those small groups based on the animals that people have said that they had at home, and then have everyone come back to your larger event, your larger virtual event, and share out whether it was, learnings that they had from each other, ideas around different ways that they were going to increase their own fundraising. It's a really great way to keep engagement up without it being just a broadcast during a fundraiser. And last but definitely not least is post-event. So follow-up. Follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. You will see a common thread throughout all of these event types that follow-up is key. During a time of physical distancing, people are struggling, right, with what do I have to do? Where do my attention have to be? We've got an ever-evolving news story. We'll need to be more diligent than normal with your follow-up strategies. So if we continue along with that example that I was giving on the animal shelter fundraiser, I could follow up in 2 groups. So number 1, I could follow up and introduce all of the people from those breakout sessions we just talked about and give them a call to action to create personal fundraising pages, for example. Number 2, I could go the route of breaking it out by all of the attendees. And I want to be really diligent in that, right? So I want to look at, maybe in 4 different segments. People who made a donation during the event, people who pledged with a money bomb but actually didn't donate during the event, people that RSVP'd but did not attend and donated, and then lastly, looking at people who RSVP'd, didn't attend and didn't donate. All of these should have specific content that's tailored to the particular segment that they're in, and we'll talk more about how to actually do this scaling within a CRM later on. So up next are conferences. So I'll speak for myself. I had, a host of conferences lined up. I know that the Evolve conference was also coming up, and a lot of those have either been postponed or some of them are actually being transitioned to virtual. This is a difficult decision to make, and I think one that you really will need to think about internally of what your audience expects of you and how you can interact with it. But some key tips of this: so agenda, keep those sessions short, right? That 20-minute average attention span is really important here when folks are coming to spend, maybe 2 full days with you virtually. You want to keep your content engaging and short. Allow for interactions at scale. So when you're thinking about interactions at scale is if we have, a conference of 1,100 people and they're all now on a virtual Zoom together, thinking about ways that you can actually engage with folks without doing one-to-one contact. So using things like polls that come within, again, the webinar features and Zoom features, thinking about using reactions and chat boxes and forums for folks to engage with content that's live. The other thing to note on this is if you are producing a conference, what I've seen be really helpful at the moment is folks pre-recording some of those sessions and just having kind of a live MC who will host those sessions throughout the day. It's a really great way to kind of get all of the information and content you need prior, and you can do some of that like before event outreach to folks with snippets of why they should still attend, even though this is a digital version of what the event was they were expecting. And again, last but not least, is that follow-up, right? Really, really key to follow up with your, with your attendees. You can look at, again, breaking this out the same way we talked about in the fundraiser component, but breaking it out by sessions that people selected that they would interact with, breaking it out by questions that were asked within the event, connecting people. It's just really key to think about custom ways to engage in follow-up now that people's attentions are being pulled in so many different directions. And the last event type is the community gatherings. And so check-ins, story circles, and community circles are all ways that myself at Nation Builder and in my role prior are ways that I have kind of focused in on how to build community intentionally. And so a check-in is traditionally done at the top of a meeting. So if you're in a professional setting, where you can ask the individuals who are participating in that meeting to kind of show up as a human and check in for what's happening in their life to ensure that they're present in that particular meeting. It's a really great way to just get a kind of a level playing field of everyone who's in the room, and a great way to kind of build a relationship with your direct reports or other individuals who you are working with on a day-to-day basis. Story circles. So story circles is absolutely not something invented by Nation Builder. It is a practice as old as time of people coming together and sharing either their story or a prompt, right? So if someone prompts you with a question and you're sharing personally, it's really, really important to think about a story circle as a safe space. So it's exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a group of people that are gathered in a circle, but a virtual circle, and they're sharing their story. It's really, really important in this to think of it as a practice of active listening. This is a time where people will get basically 8 to 10 minutes to share their story, and everyone else will be asked to listen. At the end of that experience, you get to then kind of share thematics and understand where these people are coming from, the different walks of life. It's a great team building activity for internal practices at work. It's a really great experience for if you have a community that are all from different, issue areas. If you as yourself as a nonprofit is focused on one particular issue, being able to kind of delegate that out and build story circles around people's particular issues and interest care. Last but not least is community circles. So a community circle is a larger avenue than a story circle. So story circles tend to be 8 to 10 people. And a community circle can kind of go up to 200 people. This is a space that's kind of thematic in style. So in a community circle, you should have what we call community guidelines. And that allows you as the host of that to create an environment of respect and of listening. So as an example, some of the community guidelines that we use at Nation Builder are respect confidentiality, be present within the group, say your name before you speak, and proactive listening, whether that is verbal listening or that is silent listening. Community circles are a great place to dig in on conflict resolution, right? So if there is a particular issue that is impacting your community or nonprofit, this is a great way for you to kind of pull out those thematics and allow for people to speak from a personal lens on how that experience is impacting them or how that theme is affecting them in their life. So all of these tactics allow people to actually connect as humans and see them beyond, whomever they are, whatever their title is, director this, manager that, right? Like this allows you to have a moment of humanity. And to do that, you have to guide for personal sharing. And so when we come back to those 3 top tips earlier, facilitation is really key in these community gatherings. So having one person or, up to 3 or 4 people who are actually kind of creating the space, creating a safe environment of trust and respect, as well as like moving it along if it becomes to be too intense for individuals. Okay. So up next is Nation Builder for online events. So collecting RSVPs. Your events, you're going to need to know who's actually coming. So on the right-hand side here, you are seeing a screenshot with a very cute looking little puppy. And this is from my event that I talked about hosting earlier, where I'm creating an animal shelter in my town. So the key things to think about here, right, is like, how are you collecting those RSVP? What type of content are you going to put on your site to engage with folks? Always, always, always send an auto response, right? The ability to immediately acknowledge what type of action someone's taken is really key. And then using things like text keywords, a way to interact with individuals who are RSVPing for your event. Sorry about that. So then lastly is tagging people. And what I mean by tagging people is this allows you to have your community self-identify with, in this example, you could ask them, what dogs do you have? And that would automatically add a tag to them on their profile within the CRM. Then another tactic is that money bump page we talked about. So again, we are seeing on the right-hand side a screenshot of what that front-facing site looks like. You've got the countdown timer. That's creating a sense of urgency so that folks can kind of come in and pledge the amount that you are looking for them to do. So collecting pledges, making it time bound, again, sending your auto responses and actually tagging those people. And then looking at understanding your RSVPs. So you want to get kind of a 360 picture of who these individuals are that are interacting with your content. And so what you're seeing here is kind of an overview of what does it look like to have a individual with as many data points as you can gathered as one. So you're not in this like disparate information here, information there concept. And so this on the left-hand side is the image of an individual who is RSVP'd. And all of these kind of blocks are different data points that I have around this individual. And on the right-hand side, what you're seeing here is specific types of relationships between different folks within your organization who have RSVP'd, right? So Francesca Carr, we can see, actually recruited this individual, Roger Matthews, from a volunteer ask that was made. It's a really great way to just get a full and holistic view so that when you are hosting your virtual event, you're able to reflect that data back to them, whether it be in breakout groups, whether it be in your follow-up or your pre-event outreach. And last but not least is communicating with your RSVPs, right? It's really, really key to be in constant communication with these individuals. You know, there's a lot of research that's been done that it says it takes people 7 times, like receiving information 7 times before it's registered. People are extremely busy. They are now homeschooling children. They are also holding down jobs. And so to be at the forefront of their mind with your event and your need for fundraising, it's really key that you communicate with them personally and you communicate with them in a regular cadence to ensure that they know what to expect from your organization. Okay, Erica, anything to add on your end before I kind of jump in and just show you folks some of the software?
I don't think so, no.
All right. Okay, so I am going to try and do this. If my screen will let me, there we go. Joyous, all right. Okay, so what I want to show you is just a quick view of what it looks like to interact with a front-facing website. So what you're seeing right here is that money bomb page that we talked about. And so this is giving you the ability to engage with how much you want to pledge in this particular time period. So if I jump in here, there's nothing particularly revolutionary about this. I am just going to type in my name. And I will do a test. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add that pledge. Oh, I didn't select an amount. There we go, 25. And now I'm going to add that pledge. Awesome. So once I've added that pledge, I'm immediately prompted to share that with my friends and family, right? This is a really great tactic to think about using when you are creating those virtual experiences, because you want your audience to take some ownership in how they are interacting with your events. And so thinking about how do I engage them to recruit friends and family to either participate in the event itself or actually maybe, you know, grow into your organization and learn more about you. This allows you to just kind of immediately engage with that. So now I'm going to actually jump into the CRM and we're going to see what happened. So for those of you, I know Nishimoto might be a completely new platform. This is what we call in Nation. And so when you land in here, it takes you into your dashboard. But what I'm going to show you is just the activity of the action that we just take. So this is your kind of CRM component. And so if I want to find out here who just jumped into my Nation, I'll go into my activity feed. And I'm going to be able to get a live stream of everything that's happening in the Nation. So right here, we can see that I've pledged that $25. So if I want to jump into that individual's profile, I'm going to get kind of that holistic picture of who this individual is. And in that, I can also see that this person has attended my Animal Shelter 2020 event and is a money bomb and also RSVP'd. So I'm getting some of those basic information from the tags that this individual has self-identified with. If I then scroll down, I'm getting that running feed of activity that this particular person has engaged with. So if I'm thinking about now, how do I want to communicate with this individual that's pledged on a money bomb before my event, my digital fundraising event, I want to think about maybe I want to do this at scale. I want to see other people that look like Saoirse or have similar demographics to her to actually send out an invitation to folks to come to my event. So to do that, I can just run a filter and get some criteria set. And I'm going to just type in that the city is Boston. Great. And awesome. Okay. So now I've got my audience here of 13 people that I'm going to go ahead and send an email to. So I'm going to go in and I am going to add all of these folks to a list. And great. And now I'm going to come over and just send these folks an email to get engaged with in that virtual event. So pop in here and we're going to send email 1. And great. Awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead and I am going to choose that list we just created, Boston, and continue. Awesome. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to add a time delay, because when you're thinking about, again, that pre-event moment, you want to be able to make sure that you're maximizing the way that folks are actually interacting with the content you're sending them, so that you can, gather additional data points before you go into that digital event, so you can have a more personalized experience for individuals to interact with. So let's say I'm going to say 2 days. Great. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add, the next email that I would like to go out. And that's a flow that you can create to actually get those emails out.
Can I mention something, Sorsha?
Please, Erica.
Just a tip. So what I've noticed in this COVID world that we're living in, where people are working from home, is that when you schedule, it used to be when you scheduled an online event and invited people, you would remind them, say, 2 days before, a day before. But I have found that it's actually valuable to remind them even the morning of, even an hour or two before, because they don't have to commute. And so there's also so many more invitations to online things that it's easier to forget that you said you would go to something. And so having that quick reminder allows you to get from the kitchen table to your laptop on time for that online event. It's just something I've noticed over the last, say, 3 weeks or so that's helped.
Absolutely. And I am going to jump it over. I'd love to hear from folks and get some questions for people. If there's anything in particular that we can kind of dig in further on.
Thanks, Sorsha. We do have a few questions that have come through. So the first one is, what is a hardwire internet connection? Is this not Wi-Fi?
Absolutely. So your hardwire internet connection is basically connecting to your router itself. And so your Wi-Fi exists, but a hardwire internet connection has a more reliable bandwidth because you're plugged into the source of the internet that's coming itself.
Thank you for that. The next question is, someone wants to know what microphone you use, Sorsha.
Yes, I will show you it. So I have my little microphone here that is the best microphone ever. It plugs into your laptop and it plugs into your phone. Can you see it? I don't know the name of it, actually. It's called the Shure, S-H-U-R-E. I'll send you that, so if folks have interest, that's my trick.
And so that must use just like a normal jack for.
Yeah, it just pops in here. Just a normal jack. I'll send you over the link to it so that you can share it out with folks.
Fantastic. I'll send that out with the recording. Next question is, do you have an example of a good icebreaker for an online workshop?
I do, actually. So I will plug a software that I actually just found out about, which is called Icebreaker. So there is a virtual software called Icebreaker that I'll also share the link with, and it allows you basically to create the experience of having one-on-ones. And those questions are like fast, rapid fire questions. Another good example for an icebreaker is what we call conversation menus. It allows you to basically kind of have a certain time period with one-on-one interaction. So you can use those breakout room functionalities, and you ask 3 questions in the format of a meal. And then my last one for like bigger group settings is, as people come into the virtual event, having them pop in their name and where they're coming from. And if it is, less than 100 folks, having folks just be unmuted in that first portion of the event while people are settling in, and just having some kind of normal chit chat, right? Like you would at a coffee bar or getting water or whatever in the office, and just kind of humanizing the event are all great icebreakers that we use.
A really simple one here in Australia is the weather. Like Australians love talking about the weather. And so if it's under 100, unmuting and people saying, hey, America, I'm in Tasmania and it's a bright sunny day, or it's been raining all day, those have worked really well. They're super simple get started with Icebreakers.
Yes.
Definitely. The next one is, thank you for a great webinar. How would you recommend replicating the networking you would normally be part of if you were at a face-to-face conference, or is that even possible?
It is. It's definitely possible. So last week we hosted our internal company summit, and so we had 100 or 88 people on staff that we hosted for 3 days virtually. And how we did kind of the networking in-person component that you would get is we started each of like the sessions that we had with some music, right? That just got people moving for a second, sitting in their chair. We literally did like 60 seconds doing kind of like a head roll, so like people got into the space. And then the networking piece, we used that icebreaker tool, which allowed you to get partnered up with, random individuals based on their algorithm, and prompted them with specific questions. And then lastly is we created some kind of free form spaces at the end of the day where people could relax as humans, right? And like we're all at home right now, so saying, hey, grab a glass of wine and like come and jump in and just have a chit chat was a great way to actually just like kind of replicate that networking feel. The other thing I'll add on that I've seen with some conferences that I have personally been attending virtually is using a chat forum. That's actually not in the web conference, the video conference software. So whether that's, a feedback page that you can kind of live comment through, if it's a social media platform where you're, in Twitter, for example, where you're threading tweets, it just allows people to kind of have a human connection outside of the content being delivered.
The next one isn't a question, just someone talking about the reminders that Erica talked about. So Teresa says, I've been getting reminders an hour before the start of webinars, which is perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, now on to the next question is how to offer virtual visiting countries where we are developing programs like Uganda and Romania.
How to offer virtual visiting programs? I'm not sure I understand that question.
I'm not too sure either, William. If you could please expand on that, and we'll get back to that question. We'll move on to the next one. How do you suggest formatting a member network meeting, which goes for an hour and a half?
Well, it will depend heavily on your content, but I'll make some assumptions about a member network meeting. I myself am a part of a women's like member group that's distributed all over the world. And when we meet as members, we use the Zoom functionality for video conferencing software. And all of the women come together in the one Zoom, and then you break out into we call them committees, but like areas of interest, basically, for whatever is relevant for that particular chapter, right? So that whatever that chapter is focusing on. And then we come back as a group, and someone from that particular committee presents out to the larger group on what the activities are, or next steps, whatever those calls to actions are. If I didn't answer your question there, please do feel free to clarify, but that's my assumption from my experience.
Thanks, Sasha. Just curious, it's been hard to focus on this webinar given how long it's been and how it's been all one-way communication. How would you improve this type of webinar to make it more engaging?
Absolutely. I would, I'll go back to some earlier slides, but how I like to deliver these normally is everyone is on video, and I like to take pauses and like have folks unmute and kind of like jump in with questions in the chat or just unmuting themselves. I totally agree that like the 20-minute adult average span is a real thing. And so that would be how I would improve it moving forward. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Josh. Next question is, what is the best way of facilitating many people in one session for a meeting so that they don't talk over one another? I have to facilitate one next week and don't want the flow to stop due to the people being interrupted.
That is such a great question. And please, Erica, jump in whenever you feel free to.
Yeah, so I think that we have actually really, I don't know if perfected is the right word, but at Nation Builder we do this well. we very rarely, we have meetings with cross-department meetings, and we are all remote. We have been remote for a while. One of the things that I want to suggest is something that Sorsha mentioned, which is the human check-in at the beginning. So what I've noticed is that in other roles before Nation Builder was that there was a lot of talking over each other when we weren't all together yet as a group. Like we're just not in a collaborative interacting in a collaborative way yet. So those check-ins are what helps. So at the beginning of the meeting, say there's 12 people, everyone takes 1 minute or two to say something like, hi guys, yeah, good morning, it's morning here, if it may be different time zones, and saying, I had a really rough night. I'm having trouble focusing today because I've got this fire in my inbox that I have to get through, and but I'm here. And so people check in as humans, and then they mute. Everyone gets the chance to do that. And then the agenda, obviously having an agenda with, we're going to go through this, it goes so much more smoothly because people know where each other is at and they address each other based on knowing how that person must be feeling.
Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah. Like the other thing I would just prompt on there is like asking people to speak from an I statement place so that they are owning what they are speaking, whether that's a professional setting, whether that's a, you know, why can't I think of the word other than professional? Enjoyment setting, I'm going to say. It's really important to get people to speak in kind of that I statement component so they're owning what they're putting out there and can take ownership for their own content.
Thank you, Sorsha. Next one is, I am planning a virtual community jobs fair that is usually an annual physical event with 500 attendees. The focus is for people living with a disability to engage with options post-school or other community engaging in training such as social inclusion, assistive technology, etc. Do you have any recommendations on the best software for this type of event that will need to host webinars, stalls, and activities?
So what I would honestly recommend for that is that you have a central, I would use Zoom, is my personal recommendation. And then I would recommend that you have a central Zoom room is what it's called, that hosts the entire event. Then I would have multiple event pages on whatever software you're using for event pages that have specific unique links, like Zoom rooms, that are for the different activity types. So whether that's, you know, a breakout session on the social impact pieces you just named, or if that's an area for folks to go and learn about different jobs and different activities, but making those unique URLs for each of those. And that kind of goes to that pre-event engagement. It will be really important for everyone to specifically say, okay, I'm going to go to this particular panel or this particular like Zoom room, so that you can actually connect people. And then when there's opportunities for the whole audience of 500 to gather, they can all come back to that one Zoom room, which will allow you to kind of, you know, ask or prompt individuals if there is a moment or appropriate in your event to share some information from the other rooms so that everyone can feel like they're participating in that kind of, you know, imaginary person-to-person event.
And yeah, Sorsha, I agree with all of that. And the stalls piece sounds like it would be, remember when Sorsha mentioned considering whether the content that you would be presenting in real life is actually possibly something that you can offer virtually. So I think the stalls piece is something that you really have to get creative about, since you're not going to have people able to just walk by some tables. But I could imagine some short pre-recorded videos by each stall holder that people can watch, and then a link to that person's calendar that they could schedule a 15-minute or 20-minute conversation. That might be something that you could put together nicely.
Absolutely.
Okay, next one is, you mentioned before about icebreakers. Do you have ideas about fun games for a small community group to help them get to know each other?
Yeah, I've got to say, I'd lean on the same ones I talked about. My favorite is definitely that conversation menu. Other fun kind of games. It's always great to do kind of a, tell me something you didn't know, right? So like share a story that that no one in the room knows about you. And if it's a small community that knows each other well, that can sometimes be very challenging. I'm trying to think about Erica, any other ones in your head?
I just, what I have found with these is that simple is better, and people love to talk actually at the end of the day. So those, I want to elaborate on the menu icebreaker that Sorsha has suggested, where so just to explain that more, is you offer 3 questions. So it's like a menu: entree, main, and dessert. And you can, if there's few people, you can have every person talk about the entree question, or you can separate people into smaller groups to talk about those 3 questions. And it's actually going to be easier than you think, just to get people to open up, because everyone is in this place where they want to connect with other humans at the moment.
Okay, next one is we are putting on educational webinars through Zoom. I was going to co-host and go through the chat to pass on questions to the speaker at a later time so the questions don't get lost. Is there a better way to manage questions from the audience?
Yeah, it depends on the size of your audience, is what I would say to that. Like the way I do these when we host kind of every other day webinars through Zoom, and so we'll have a staff member who's monitoring the chat, and we'll pull those out and export the chat actually, so you've got the file of the particular conversation as the questions come in. And if there is a very timely question that makes sense to flag for the lead facilitator or the lead host, you can actually do a private message in Zoom's chat functionality to the host, so that they get a notification to say like, hey, this is a timely question that came in. Can you shift your presentation to interact with the particular content? It also helps if you think back to that experiential learning component of reflecting back and making sure that you're checking for understanding. So if you are hosting kind of the educational component, I think having questions and a lot of regular pauses in your delivery is really important to check for understanding and make sure that folks are getting the content they need.
Okay, next question is, how can we engage the senior community members who do not have much knowledge about using technology?
That is a really good question. I'll speak from personal experience if that's helpful. Like my grandparents live in a very rural village in Ireland, and I have, I will call them and kind of walk them through how to get on to a Zoom or onto a FaceTime, and I will kind of be on the phone with my nan whilst also like my granda is doing the things I'm saying to him. That's like one way. I know that there are a lot of nonprofits actually in the UK that I work with that are sending out kind of direct mail to elderly communities that have kind of screenshots of how to go through whatever software it is that they're trying to get them to work on, to be able to kind of come and battle isolation and loneliness as a whole. So those are two that I know of.
What are some effective strategies to get people to be linked to online community activities?
It's all about your audience, right? Like it depends. So online community activities can mean a number of things. I will make an assumption based on that. So like, for example, I'm an avid political, member of political engagement within my local community. And I participate in those online activities because there is a intentional outreach plan to me that is reflecting back whatever my issue areas of interest are and why I should be participating in whatever that activity is, right? Whether it's a live web forum, whether it's a petition, or a virtual event. like reflecting back to the individual, how they got involved with your organization and why they should care is a really important strategy for keeping folks to be engaged.
Okay, so that looks like it's all for questions today, Saoirse and Erica. Was there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up this session?
Just a huge thank you. I really hope that today's session was valuable for folks, and always happy to field questions. If you want to reach out to me, please let the Connecting Up team know.
And
Right.
I guess the last thing I want to say is I was born in Colombia. I grew up in the US, and now I live in Australia. I've been here for over 10 years. I've noticed differences in culture that makes it sometimes more challenging to do things virtually in our Australian culture, just because sometimes, and this is a generalization, so I apologize, but more subtle. It's a more subtle culture where you know, we're not loud and in your face generally. And so what that means for virtual community is that it requires you to be just brave and go, you know what, I'm going to try this out. And even if there's a bit of silence, I only get 3 people. It doesn't mean that I failed. I just tried something that was a little bit uncomfortable, and that's okay. And virtually, you kind of have to be a little bit more animated version of yourself, because we're flat. We're not 3D. We're not in front of each other. So I personally have felt this in starting doing things virtually, but the more and more I practice, the easier it gets. So have a go.
Yay.
Great. Thank you so much, Saoirse and Erica, for presenting today. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learned a lot from the presentation and that your questions have been answered. But if you do have any other questions that come to mind later on, or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we can answer those offline. Don't forget the recording will be available on the website very shortly, and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Saoirse. Thanks, Erica.
Bye.